She was trained to destroy humans, until one taught her what strength really means. What if strength wasn't about power, but about pain? What if the fiercest warrior in a galaxy born to burn, trained to conquer, met a quiet human who had no armor, no aura, and no reason to win, except that he had to? In a galaxy ruled by caste, pride, and legacy, one alien elite discovers that everything she was taught to believe crumbles the moment she meets him. Not through explosions or glory, but through silence, through scars, through survival. This isn't just another human versus alien tale. This is a story of two fighters, one bred for war, one broken by it, who finds something worth more than victory. Stay with me. Because by the end of this story, you won't be asking who won the fight. You'll be asking what they were willing to lose to find each other. The skies above Prime pulsed with molten red veins. The atmosphere always seemed on the edge of burning, as if the planet itself mirrored the people who ruled it. Atop a jagged plateau carved by wind and war stood the flame-born academy, its obsidian towers shimmering with kinetic energy. Here, the strongest warriors in the galaxy trained, bred for war, perfected by centuries of bloodline science and genetic evolution. Every corridor echoed with the footsteps of warriors, every arena was soaked in history, and every breath carried the weight of legacy. And today, they were hosting humans. Lysera Vael stood at the balcony overlooking searing grounds Theta, her arms folded across her crimson training armor, her flame-hued eyes narrowed with disapproval. The hum of psychic fields around her flared slightly in response to her irritation. "Look at them," she muttered. Below, a small squad of humans had just disembarked from a trembling transport shuttle. Clad in neutral gray fatigues, they moved with rigid discipline, but no flame, no power, no aura. "Which one is ours?" she asked without turning. Behind her, Instructor Kezran consulted a data pad. His voice was as crisp as shattered glass. "Unit 7. Calen Rook. Earthborn. War Refugee. Assigned to your training cohort for cultural integration and comparative strategy analysis." Lysera scoffed. "I asked for a sparring challenger, not a charity case." "Orders came from the Concord," Kezran said, unaffected. "The War Council wants peace. Peace requires symbols. You are one. So is he." Lysera's jaw clenched. She was flame-born, born of fire and honed by combat since the day she could walk. Her psychic aura had manifested at age 5. By 12, she had defeated adult opponents in full battle trance. And now they wanted her to integrate with a species that had lost its planet? She turned from the balcony and walked away. "If he survives a week, I'll be surprised." Below, Calen Rook lifted his head. He had felt the stare. The weight of judgment wasn't new to him. But it never stopped hurting. Inside the Academy's intake hall, the air shimmered with ambient genetic pressure. Lysera entered, the floor responding with low pulses under her boots. Flame-born cadets parted instinctively as she passed, offering crisp bows. She returned none. At the far end, the human group stood in formation. She saw him immediately. Not because he stood out, quite the opposite. He didn't carry a weapon. No visible tech, no exosuit enhancements. Just a lean frame wrapped in worn fabric and a burn-scarred patch on one side of his neck. He didn't shift nervously like the others. He stood still, eyes ahead, hands at his sides. Unbothered. Or maybe just tired. Lysera stepped into the center of the room. "I am Lysera Vael," she said, her voice sharp and clear. "War Scion of the High Flame caste. You have been assigned to my squad." Calen looked at her then. Really looked. His gaze wasn't defiant, but it wasn't submissive either. Just calm. Measuring. Yes, ma'am. Lysera felt something strange flicker in her chest, irritation, maybe. He hadn't bowed. Not even a nod. Do you know how to fight, human? I've had practice. A few flame-born cadets nearby chuckled. Lysera stepped closer, eyes narrowing. Out there, she said, pointing toward the open arena just beyond the archway, we don't practice. We bleed. Your kind might be new to this war, but we were born for it. Calen didn't flinch. Then I guess I'm in the right place, he said. It was quiet. Too quiet. Instructor Kezran's voice cut through the tension. You'll be paired for tactical drills tomorrow. Dismissed. The cadets filed out. Lysera brushed past Calen without a second glance, but not before noticing something. He hadn't broken eye contact once. That night, in her private quarters, Lysera tried to meditate. To center her aura flame. But her mind kept drifting, not to her sparring records, not to tomorrow's drills. To a pair of quiet gray eyes that had looked into hers. And never looked away. The morning sun on Viral Prime was always red, not from a natural dawn, but from the refraction of heat storms simmering at the planet's edge. The Flameborn believed it was the blood of their ancestors, still boiling in the sky. Lysera Vael walked onto searing grounds Theta, her stride fluid and commanding. Her crimson practice robes clung to her figure like woven flame. Around her, psychic auras shimmered, cadets warming up with arcs of mental fire and body kinetic strikes. The ground vibrated with anticipation. Today's training would be public. She found her squad assembled by the outer ring. 5 flame-born cadets, elite, polished, deadly. And then, the human. Calen Rook stood slightly apart, like a shadow that didn't quite belong to the room. No aura shimmered around him. No weapon gleamed at his side. His uniform was already dusty, the boots slightly too big, as if recycled from another lost soldier. Lysera approached. Her eyes met his again, still unreadable, still annoyingly calm. Do you stretch? She asked curtly. Yes. Then do it. You'll need to be loose when I drop you. He gave a half smile. Looking forward to it. Instructor Kezran called them into a semicircle. Today, we test reflex coordination in non-lethal duels. Flameborn first, then, the humans. There was only one human. Kezran's gaze landed on Calen, sharp and assessing. Rook. You're up first. Lysera stepped forward immediately. I'll take him. A murmur rippled through the squad. Kezran raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He stepped back and activated the arena shield, a glowing barrier humming to life around them. Non-lethal only, he said. No flame state, Vael. I'll behave, Lysera said, eyes never leaving Calen. Calen stepped into the ring, his posture relaxed. No stance. No spark. Lysera narrowed her gaze. You don't look ready. I'm not trying to look like anything. She circled him slowly. The others watched intently, expecting blood, humiliation. A flameborn versus a human, a formality, not a challenge. Lysera lunged. Fast. A flash of movement as she swept low, aiming to knock him off balance before he even blinked. But he blinked. And stepped aside. Just enough. Her foot met air. No contact. She landed, pivoted, came at him with a feint followed by a sharp elbow toward his ribs. It should have connected, She was too fast. But he leaned back, spine like liquid steel. The strike grazed his shirt. Lysera's eyes flicked wide for half a second. He's not fast, she thought. He's just watching. Not bad, Calen said softly, stepping back. For someone trying to embarrass me? You think I need to try, she snapped. She came again, harder, faster. A knee to his stomach, an open palm strike to the side of his neck. But Calen didn't fight back. He dodged. Leaned. Slipped through her like smoke. And then, he moved. Just one motion. He caught her wrist as she overcommitted a strike and twisted, redirecting her momentum. She stumbled forward, knees almost hitting the ground, but caught herself. The crowd gasped. Lysera's cheeks burned. Not from pain, from shame. She spun around. You mocking me? No, Calen said, releasing her arm. I'm surviving. She stared at him, chest heaving. She could feel the heat rising in her aura, begging to ignite, but she held it back. You're not even fighting. I'm not stupid either. She froze. For a moment, they just looked at each other, fire and stone, pressure, and stillness. Then Instructor Kezran's voice cut in. Enough. Rook wins. First contact without return. Vael compromised footing. That's a defeat. Lysera's jaw locked. That wasn't official. Move on. She stormed out of the ring, her aura flaring once in frustration. The cadets parted as she passed, stunned into silence. No one said a word. Behind her, Calen simply stepped back into line. Later, in the locker hall, she stood at the basin, splashing water on her face. She could still feel the phantom grip of his hand on her wrist. Not rough. Not mocking. Just efficient. She looked into the mirror and whispered to herself. Who is this guy? The archives of the Flameborn Academy were built into the cooled crust of an ancient volcano, a temple of data carved by lava and time. Its walls pulsed with thermal veins, and its silence was absolute, broken only by the flickering of data streams across obsidian screens. Lysera rarely came here unless it was to study war doctrine or past victory hollows. But today was different. She stood before a flickering panel, arms crossed, staring at a file that refused to give her what she wanted. Subject, Rook, Calen. Status, Provisional Trainee, Galactic Accord Exchange Program. Origin, Earth, Decommissioned Colony World. Family status, redacted. Combat history, restricted, level 5 clearance required. Level 5? She frowned. Why would a human refugee trainee have classified combat history? She tapped her wristband. Instructor Kezran. His voice crackled through the COMM. Yes, Vael. I need full access to Calen Rook's combat profile. A pause. Denied. It's sealed by a court order. Lysera's fingers clenched into a fist. He's in my squad. And he's not your enemy, Kezran replied coolly. Consider the lesson in that. The line cut out. Lysera exhaled slowly, jaw tight. She hated being stonewalled. But more than that, she hated not understanding what she had seen yesterday in the ring. He should not have been able to move like that. She could handle loss. But not confusion. Not silence. And Calen Rook was made of both. That evening, the sun bled crimson across the jagged cliffs as training wrapped for the day. Lysera, still burning with frustration, headed toward the outer courtyard. a lesser-used platform with a view of the storm-lit sea below. And there he was, sitting alone, legs hanging off the edge, watching the sky boil. No aura. No fire. Just stillness. She approached. You like staring into storms? Calen didn't turn. They remind me of home. She hesitated. Earth didn't have lava seas. No, he said quietly. But it had endings. That silenced her more than she expected. Lysera stepped closer, but didn't sit. You fight like someone who's not afraid to lose. He tilted his head slightly, like the idea was foreign. I've already lost everything that mattered, he said. What's left to be afraid of? Lysera felt the words like a quiet blade in her chest. She wasn't used to raw honesty, especially not from someone who had every reason to hate her kind. She lowered herself beside him, the edge of her armor brushing his sleeve. I looked up your file, she said. Calen smirked faintly. Let me guess. Access denied. Level 5 clearance. That's Concord military grade. He shrugged. Why? She asked. Why are they protecting you? He looked at her finally, eyes gray and quiet. But this time, she saw something behind them. Grief. Rage. A sorrow so old it had turned into steel. I don't think they are protecting me, he said. I think they are protecting themselves. Lysera swallowed. This wasn't just some soldier. This wasn't a body tossed into training for politics. This was a survivor. One who had seen something, done something, that scared even the people who trained him. She spoke softer now. You didn't dodge because you're fast. No. You dodged because you knew what I was going to do. He nodded. Lysera shook her head. How? Calen turned back to the storm. Because I've fought creatures stronger than you. Faster. Smarter. And they all made the same mistake. Which is? They thought strength meant victory. Lysera felt the words in her spine. No Flameborn had ever spoken to her like that. And somehow, she didn't hate it. She sat in silence beside him for a long moment. Then, gently, she asked, do you miss it? You're home. Calen's lips barely moved. Every time I close my eyes. A hot wind swept over them. Lysera looked at him sideways, at the burn scars on his neck, the tension in his shoulders that never seemed to leave. Not a warrior by blood. A warrior by necessity. And suddenly, her flame didn't feel like power. It felt like privilege. The sparring chamber beneath the main academy was rarely used. It had no observation decks. No glowing combat rings. No Shinik monitors. Just cold stone floors, training mats, and a silence that clung like dust. Lysera stood barefoot in the center, her training wrap clinging to her like a second skin. She had shut off the lights, the only glow came from the simmering lava veins under the floor, casting molten shadows along the walls. It was late. Too late for official drills. She had invited him here. And now, he was late. She turned toward the door just as it slid open. Calen stepped in, shirt clinging to his chest from a prior training round, breath steady, eyes as calm as always. He paused at the edge of the mat. No audience, he asked. Lysera shrugged. Didn't feel like giving them a show. You sure this is about training? Her lips curved. Are you nervous? He stepped closer. I don't get nervous. But he stopped just outside arm's reach, gaze cautious. I won't burn you, she said softly. I'm not worried about that, he said. I'm worried you still don't know what you're trying to prove. That hit deeper than she liked. She squared her shoulders. Maybe I'm trying to understand how someone like you scarred, slower, no enhancements beat me? Calen nodded slowly. That's honest. I'll take that. She stepped into her stance. Then fight me. No powers. Just instinct. He dropped into a loose guard, unpolished but efficient. No pain. No promises. The first clash was quick. Lysera moved in with a feint and a low sweep. Calen dodged. Again. Just enough. She followed with a fast palm strike, and this time he blocked, his hand catching hers with an audible clap. He didn't strike back. Just redirected, stepped aside, forced her to overextend. Again. Lysera grunted in frustration. Why do you keep backing off? Calen circled her, not panting, not posturing. Just present. Because I'm not here to hurt you, he said. I'm here to help you see? See what? He moved. Quick, faster than she expected, and grabbed her shoulder, spinning her around, bringing her back to his chest before letting go. Not violent. But controlling. Precise. He let her go. She stumbled forward, caught herself. I'm trying to show you what your instructors won't, he said. She turned, breathing hard. Which is? That your power's blinding you. You don't adapt. You dominate. Until someone doesn't let you. Lysera stared at him. Her fists lowered, slowly. No one had ever spoken to her like this. Not like a rival. Not like a subordinate. But like an equal. Or worse, someone who understood her better than she did. Her voice came low. Then teach me. Calen's expression softened. That's not something you say easily. I don't say anything easily, she said. You noticed. A silence bloomed between them. It wasn't awkward, it felt electric. She stepped closer. Inches now. The heat of her skin just brushing the air around his. You fought things stronger than me, she said. He nodded. Did you win? He hesitated. Sometimes. And the other times. I lived. That made her heart do something unfamiliar. Something almost painful. I've never had to survive, she admitted. I've only had to win. That's why you're not as strong as you think. She didn't flinch. For once, she took the truth like a strike to the ribs, breathless, grounding. She dropped her stance entirely. So show me. He stepped forward. Slowly. Deliberately. Placed his hand gently against the center of her chest, just over her flame plate, just where the heartbeat pulses before battle. Feel, he said. Not for your fire. Not for your speed. For what I'm going to do next. She closed her eyes. His breath near hers. His palm still. And in that moment, for the first time since she was a child, she didn't feel like a flame born. She felt human. The morning began without ceremony. No blaring announcements. No drills. Just Lysera stepping onto the outer training sands alone this time. She had asked for it. Not from the instructors. From him. Calen stood at the edge of the arena with the sun behind him, casting his silhouette long across the stone. He looked like a statue carved out of loss and endurance. He wasn't wearing armor. He never did. But Lysera noticed now his scars were armor. Small ones. Jagged ones. A line just beneath his ribcage. A knotted wound on his shoulder that never quite healed right. They were maps of battles no one ever recorded. She approached, already sweating beneath the twin suns. "No order today?" he asked, voice neutral. She shook her head. "I want to train the way you fight." "Good." He dropped his stance. "First lesson?" She raised an eyebrow. "I thought we already started." "No," he said. "That was a lesson in how easy it is to fall." He stepped forward and extended his hand. "Now we learn how to stand." They began slowly. Footwork. Balance. Breath. Lysera hated it. Not because it was hard, but because it was humbling. Every instinct in her body wanted to move fast, to strike hard, to ignite. But Calen stopped her every time. "Don't react with power," he said. "React with understanding." "Sounds like something a monk would say," she grunted. "Monks don't survive firefights," he replied. "I did." She scoffed, but she listened. Hour after hour passed. They didn't spar today, not properly. They moved. Repeated. Broke habits. Unlearned patterns she'd trained into her since childhood. By midday, her legs ached. Her arms trembled. Her pride? Long buried under sweat and dirt. She collapsed onto the mat, breathing hard. Her crimson undershirt clung to her skin. Hair matted. Dignity? Gone. Calen sat beside her without a word. For a while, the only sound was her heartbeat. Then she asked, quietly, "Did you train like this on Earth?" He looked up at the sky. "No, I trained like this on a ship. A freighter. Half of it burning. My sister was in the cargo hold, hiding. I fought just to buy time." Lysera turned her head toward him, breath still ragged. "Did you save her?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence between them turned heavy. "Sacred." "I used to think scars meant failure," she whispered. Calen shook his head slowly. "Scars mean you chose to keep going." She didn't know why, but her throat tightened. She'd never heard someone speak like that. Not her mentors. Not her peers. Not her own father, a flame warden who once told her pain was a weakness to be silenced. And yet, here she was, learning more in one broken afternoon from a human refugee than from a decade of elite instruction. She reached out and lightly touched the scar near his collarbone. He didn't flinch. "Does this one have a story?" she asked. He nodded. "A lesson." "What lesson?" Calen met her eyes. "Don't wait for someone to save you." Her chest ached at those words. Not because they were cold, but because she believed him. That night, Lysera stood under the heat lamps in her private chamber, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her arms were sore. Her pride was bruised. But beneath the fatigue, she felt something else. Alive. Awake. Curious. She raised her hand and slowly turned it palm up. For the first time, she didn't summon her flame. She just watched her hand. And wondered what it would mean to fight without fire, and still win. The sky above the flame-born academy split with thunder. Except it wasn't weather. It was a drill alarm. Lysera shot upright in a dormitory chamber, red lights pulsing across her walls. The comms crackled to life overhead. Level 3 live combat simulation initiated. All cadets to sectors Alpha through Delta. No flame state. No psychic enhancements. Standard weapons only. Her pulse spiked. A surprise drill. That meant randomized teams. Variable terrain. Controlled chaos. She moved fast, pulling on her light armor and binding her hair back in a tight braid. As she raced through the corridors, cadets poured out in every direction, the air buzzing with nervous energy. When she reached the Alpha staging deck, her eyes scanned the room. And there he was. Calen. He wore the same tattered uniform, unarmored, a simple sidearm holstered at his thigh. No one was talking to him. As usual. Their eyes met. No nods. No smiles. But the air between them tightened, like a wire stretched taut. The briefing flashed to life above the holodatus. Scenario: Ruins breach. Objective: defend strategic uplink for 15 minutes against simulated enemy drones. Mixed species squads. No shinix allowed. Squad 9, Vael, Rook, Calen, Drax. Lysera blinked. 4 cadets. Only one she trusted. The ruins were a maze of collapsed stone and iron bones, a war memorial site turned battlefield. As they moved into position, Calen crouched behind a broken column, scanning the skies. Lysera stayed near him, weapons primed, her aura intentionally suppressed. "You good?" she asked, trying to sound detached. "Always," he said, checking his ammo clip. Calen, a cocky telepath with too much jaw and not enough strategy, sneered from behind a wall. "This'll be rich. A flame-born princess and her favorite stray mutt." Lysera's eyes narrowed. "Shut up and watch the sky." Then the drones came. Not 2. Not 10. Dozens. Screaming from the atmosphere like silver hornets, synthetic wings cutting the wind, plasma cannons lighting up the ruins. Calen screamed first. A shot clipped his shoulder and sent him into cover. Drax opened fire, wild and inefficient. Lysera ducked low, aiming with discipline, clean shots, one after another. But the drones kept coming. Fast. Coordinated. Too fast. Beside her, Calen moved like he had no nerves left to fray. He slid across gravel, fired 3 rounds, pivoted behind cover, shouted directions to Drax without looking. Commanding. Clear. Not loud, but impossible to ignore. 2 flanking left, he called. Lysera turned. Sure enough, 2 metal bodies darted from the far column. She blasted them mid-air, but the effort cost her cover. A drone locked onto her position, descending with a whirring plasma blade. She raised her weapon, too slow. And then... crack! The drone's core exploded just inches from her face. Calen's smoking barrel lowered. He didn't wait for thanks. "Stop thinking like a duelist," he barked, reloading. "This is war. Cover your blind zones." Something flared in her chest. Pride? No. Respect. She followed him now, not because he demanded it. Because she trusted him to know how to survive. The timer ticked down, 2 minutes and 41 seconds remaining. They were bleeding. Drax was unconscious. Calen was barely firing. Lysera knelt beside the uplink terminal, shielding it with her body. Calen crouched beside her, shoulder to shoulder. "How many shots?" she asked. 7 left. "Weapons." "Mine's overheating." "Yours." She checked hers. "Jammed." They looked at each other. The sky roared. 5 drones descended, final wave. Calen stood. Not dramatically. Just, ready. Lysera grabbed his arm. You'll get hit. His reply was soft. So will you. And then he moved. The final moments blurred. She remembered shouts. Sparks. Her own body slamming into a wall. Calen taking a blow for her with a grunt. Her flame rising instinctively, but she held it back. No aura. Just instinct. And in those last seconds, back to back, they held the uplink. The terminal chimed. Simulation complete. The sky went silent. The drones froze mid-air, then vanished in bursts of blue code. Lysera collapsed onto her knees, panting, blood dripping from a cut above her eye. Calen crouched beside her, chest rising and falling with calm rhythm. She looked at him. You fight like someone who expects to lose. He turned his head, that quiet smile ghosting his lips again. No, he said. I fight like someone who can't afford to. She stared at him. Not just as a warrior. As something more. Something human. Something necessary. The aftermath of the simulation left the academy in a strange, breathless hush. Reports were filed. Injuries treated. Instructors reviewed tactical breakdowns. Drax had a concussion. Calen requested reassignment, humiliated that a powerless human had led the squad while he bled behind a wall. But no one mentioned Lysera. And no one could explain why she'd followed Calen's orders without hesitation. No one, but her. She found him that night in the lower gardens, a rarely visited sanctuary where heat blossoms grew in silence and the air shimmered with geothermal breath. Calen sat on the edge of a stone platform, sleeves rolled up, cleaning his weapon with slow, practiced care. Moonlight from Viralda's red moon fell across his face, catching in a scar beneath his jaw. He didn't flinch when she approached. You're bleeding, she said. He looked at the dried cut on his forearm. It's fine. Lysera knelt in front of him anyway, pulled a thermal cloth from her belt, and wiped the blood away. Calen watched her, quiet. She didn't meet his eyes. You shouldn't have taken that hit for me. You would have done the same, he said. No, she whispered. I would have burned everything around us instead of protecting just one person. She finally looked up. I think that's the difference between us. Calen didn't reply. Not with words. But his eyes softened, that gray storm stillness she'd come to understand not as cold, but as controlled. Like someone who had once let himself burn, and barely survived it. She sat beside him. I used to think humans were a liability, she admitted. Untrained. Weak. Lacking focus. But I see it now. What? That you don't fight to prove yourself? Calen exhaled. Not anymore. Then why do you fight? He hesitated. For the ones who didn't make it. That answer hit her in a place she didn't know could ache. She leaned back against the stone wall, gazing up at the violet sky pulsing with faint lightning above the academy towers. What if I told you, she said slowly, I don't want to be who I was bred to be? Calen's voice was soft. Then you're more human than you think. She turned to him, lips parting in a half-breath. That's not a compliment on my world. It should be. Their eyes locked. It wasn't like before, full of heat and challenge. This was still. Charged. Terrifying. She reached up, almost without thinking, and brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. Her fingers grazed his skin. He didn't move. didn't break contact. She leaned in, just enough to feel his breath, close enough to wonder. And then she pulled back. Not out of fear, but because if she crossed that line now, she wouldn't be able to uncross it later. And they both knew it. As they stood to leave, Calen said one last thing. They won't like this. You and me. I don't care. He raised an eyebrow. You will. She smirked, but her eyes were steady. Let them try to stop me? And for the first time since arriving at the academy, Lysera Vael was no longer training to win. She was training to choose. The academy's combat chambers echoed with the clash of metal and breath. Lysera moved like heat incarnate, a blur of controlled strikes, dodging her opponent's blade, flipping him with one fluid motion that ended in a hard slam to the mat. The cadets around her murmured. Some impressed, some suspicious. She was sharper now, quieter. Her flame still flickered under her skin, but it didn't roar anymore. Not since him. She turned away from the fallen cadet and locked eyes with Calen, who stood near the observation rail. He hadn't been invited to the session. He came anyway. And she didn't ask him to leave. Later, when the room emptied and the lights dimmed, he was still there, silent as stone, eyes steady as the moon. You're getting faster, he said as she approached. She smirked. I've had a decent teacher. Calen tilted his head. He must be very patient. She stepped closer. He must be very annoying. He smiled faintly. That too. For a moment, they just stood there. Not touching. Not talking. But everything between them was speaking. Lysera reached behind her head, unfastened her battle tie, and let her braid unravel. Her hair spilled over her shoulders, dark and untamed, a gesture rarely seen by anyone. Calen didn't move. But his breath caught just slightly. She noticed. And stepped closer. He said I'm changing, she whispered. Instructor Kezran. That my technique is different. That I'm losing the flame-born edge. Calen met her gaze. Maybe you're just finding your own edge. Or maybe, she said, I'm losing control. He didn't argue. He stepped forward, slow, deliberate, until they were almost chest to chest. You're not losing control, he said quietly. You're making choices. And you, she asked, voice just a breath now. What would you choose? If you weren't afraid of what came next? Calen didn't answer. Instead, he reached up and touched her face, gently, with reverence, like he expected her to pull away. She didn't. Her eyes fluttered closed, and she leaned into his palm. And then, slowly, painfully slow, she pressed her forehead to his. No kiss. Not yet. Just the shared gravity of two people holding themselves together in a world built to tear them apart. The moment broke when the chamber doors hissed open. Lysera stepped back like lightning, and Calen turned toward the sound, instincts coiled tight. It was Calen. Of course. He stood in the doorway, arms folded, eyes burning with smug satisfaction. Interesting little meeting, he said coldly. I always wondered how low a flameborn could fall. Lysera's voice was ice. Leave. But Calen didn't. You think the high castes won't hear about this? A royal bloodline weapon warming up to a human stray. Calen didn't speak. Didn't flinch. Lysera stepped forward, her aura flaring just enough to send the overhead lights into a brief flicker. I said leave. Calen hesitated, sensing the crackle of her warning. Then he turned, muttering, It won't stay secret. The door hissed shut behind him. Silence returned. But the damage had been done. Calen finally spoke, voice low, "We knew this would happen." Lysera turned toward him, fire in her veins, not fear, not shame. Defiance. "I'm not going to hide." "That's not what I'm worried about," Calen said. "I'm worried what they'll do to you." She reached out, took his hand, truly held it for the first time. Firm. Proud. Unapologetic. "They'll try to shame me. Strip me of title. Maybe even exile me." "And you're okay with that?" he asked, quietly stunned. "No," she said. "But I'm more okay with that than walking away from something real." He looked at her. And finally, they kissed. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't explosive. It was earned. A slow collapse into each other, a promise between warriors who had suffered alone for too long. Her lips tasted of salt and flame. His touch was steady, not possessive, but anchoring. And when they pulled apart, the world hadn't ended. But it had changed. The summons arrived at dawn. A thin silver seal, cold to the touch, pressed into Lysera's door with no ceremony, only weight. "By decree of the Flame-born Council of Discipline, Lysera Vael is hereby ordered to stand in trial combat to reaffirm allegiance to the caste and code. Violation of species protocols has been observed. Refusal to comply results in expulsion and name erasure." At the bottom, a name stamped in red. Opponent, Rook, Calen. Lysera stood in silence, eyes locked on the parchment. She didn't speak. Didn't breathe. She burned. The arena was filled by midday. Not just cadets, elders, instructors, even observers from the high castes. The outer rings trembled with anticipation, but the mood was not festive. It was ceremonial. Punitive. At the center of the circle, the command dais shimmered. Instructor Kezran stood beside it, robes flowing behind him like scorched wind. "This is a bloodless reckoning," he announced. "No lethal strikes. No enhancements. No weapons. One victor. One fall." Lysera entered first, clad in ceremonial gray, stripped of her red flames, her title, her house insignia. She wore only the weight of her choice. And then Calen stepped into the ring. He didn't bow. He didn't flex. He simply looked at her, like the night before had never ended. Like he still trusted her, even now. She took her stance. A hybrid now, part flame-born, part human instinct. Calen stood relaxed. A slight bend in the knees, hands open, eyes sharp. The signal flared. And they moved. Not with rage. Not with hatred. But with clarity. Lysera struck first, a sweeping kick she knew he'd dodge, followed by a pivot and a low feint toward his hip. He caught it, twisted, stepped away. They circled. The crowd leaned in. This was no grudge match. This was understanding turned physical. Lysera ducked, swept again, this time forcing him off balance. He recovered with a roll, flipped back onto his feet, and lunged low. She blocked, their forearms clashing. And then something changed. Their eyes met. And neither struck. They held the pose, arms locked, and just breathed. The crowd murmured. Kezran's voice echoed, sharp and cold, "Proceed." But Lysera didn't move. Instead, she dropped her arms and stepped back. "I refuse." Gasps erupted around the chamber. Kezran's eyes narrowed. Explain. Lysera raised her chin. I will not prove my loyalty by betraying my heart. A pause. And then. I stand with him. Not against him. Chaos. Voices clashed. Some shouted heresy. Others called for exile. Someone yelled, she's fallen to human weakness. But Calen, he just stood there. Still. Waiting. Not for rescue. But to see if she'd walk through the fire with him. Lysera turned slowly, and reached for his hand. He took it without hesitation. Their fingers laced together, two warriors, defiant in the face of legacy, caste, and expectation. Kezran's voice cut through the storm. Very well. His tone shifted, softer, but final. Let the record show, Lysera Vael is flameborn no longer. Her fire is her own. She didn't flinch. Didn't weep. She just turned toward Calen, her voice like a blade wrapped in silk. Now I'm finally free. They walked side by side, down the obsidian bridge that led away from the academy gates. No guards. No escort. Just the wind and the sky and the silence that follows a storm. Behind them, the flame-born banners still burned red in the wind, symbols of victory, of legacy, of 1,000 years of control. But Lysera didn't look back. She was flame-born no longer. And for the first time, she felt light. Calen adjusted the strap of the duffel slung across his shoulder. He said nothing at first. He didn't have to. His presence had always spoken loudest in silence. But after a while, he asked quietly, where will you go? Lysera smirked. You assume I have a plan? I assume you always have a plan? Not this time. He nodded. Same. She glanced over. Scared. Calen exhaled. Terrified. She chuckled, but the sound caught in her throat. There was still grief behind her smile. The kind of grief that comes when you choose to let go of everything you were born into. The kind of grief that gives birth to freedom. They reached the cliff's edge where the sky opened wide, and the twin suns bathed the black ocean in molten light. Lysera dropped her bag beside a worn stone and sat, pulling her knees to her chest. I thought I'd feel more rage, she said softly. Or regret. Calen sat beside her. You don't? I just feel, she looked up at him. Open. Like the world stopped trying to shape me, and now I have to shape myself. That's the hard part, he said. When no one tells you who to be. They sat in the quiet again. Not as a princess and a soldier. Not as alien and human. But as equals, forged through conflict and choice. Calen reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a fragment of his old ship's hull, scorched black, no larger than a coin. He placed it in her hand. I kept it after Earth fell, he said. So I'd never forget what surviving cost me? Lysera stared at the broken metal, the burn marks, the cold weight of it. She closed her hand around it. I'll keep it for you, she whispered. Calen turned to her, quiet and steady. You don't have to protect me. She looked into his eyes. No. But I want to. And then, no hesitation this time, she leaned in and kissed him. Not out of fire, but out of choice. Not to claim, but to affirm. Their lips met like two storms finally finding calm in each other. And when they parted, she placed a metal piece against her chest, over where her flame used to burn. You know, she said softly, they always taught us that our power came from what we were born with. But I think they were wrong. Calen raised an eyebrow. Where does it come from, then? She smiled. From what we choose to protect. They stood together as the winds picked up. The path ahead was uncertain, full of stars and silence, of worlds they'd have to face alone. But not apart. Never again apart. As they walked forward, the academy behind them faded into the horizon. And a new fire, not of blood, but of will, lit the path ahead. She gave up her name. He gave up his fear. And together, they walked away not as legend and outsider, not as warrior and refugee but as equals, bound not by blood or war, but by choice. This story wasn't about power. It was about change. About the kind of strength that comes not from what you're born with, but from what you survive and who you choose to become after. So now I want to hear from you. Would you have made the same choice Lysera did? Do you think love can survive across species, across culture, across a battlefield? What would you give up, for something real? Drop your thoughts below. Let's talk. And if you want more stories like this where love is forged in fire and tested in silence, make sure you're here for the next one. Because we're just getting started.